just enough left over part-time.
You're finishing now?
Good.
We were wondering how the years is like you sent available to get February. So we were wondering like are you okay for it? You want
I'm trying to get you some funding.
Yeah, we saw that. Yeah,
You said something like 6,000. I'm trying to get you
5,500.
Because one of the persons I asked was Jeff Henderson. So when he comes, he's going to sit in the front of the elevator. So during the break, the guy.
Yeah, because it's like very, we don't have any details. Just only Sitaka.
Right.
But we don't know like there's a lot of variables in the ones like it's a prime locations and the total cost goes up, and if it's a weekend flight, but still
I am going to be.
we have got 85 for is around $400 for New York and then Osaka. That's actually assuming like a night stay.
Okay.
Which is typically the case for us. And we are kind of assuming like a network sharing basis around $300 per person. So it would be like 5,000, like 7,700. Sorry, we have 7. So it's
That's pretty reasonable. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how. I just booked the trip to Washington, and it's going to be 1,500 with airfare. But I'm spending 5 days. You're only spending 1 day, 1 or 2 days.
Soil science.
2 days.
And Washington is
Conservation.
So yeah, but
so
that's still a like a more topic like you said.
It says it's a Buffett. You know what Buffett is, right? They're this global study. So everything international is Buffett. Okay, so Buffett might fund you. We need to figure isolation. I didn't hear anything back from Farley. I don't think Farley's.
We have
So
some.
it's probably the ISO or Buffett. Maybe both.
Time. And yeah,
Yeah.
we'll send you a meeting invite for in-person meeting then in your office, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I was in person, it should be Tuesdays or
What time would you prefer?
Tuesday afternoons.
Yeah, like
Or
you said,
Thursday
right?
late afternoon.
Okay.
Oh, so it's like after the
Before
the
class
class maybe.
or after lunch on Tuesdays.
Tuesday.
Or we can do Zoom.
Well, I think people prefer just to have online. Oh, sorry.
I'm in person.
Yeah. So we can do that. And by the way, the idea that was the DC fast charges.
Yes.
But it's not really the fast charges because, as I mentioned in the mail, they are trying to cater to unprivileged underprivileged society. So they don't really have like
Stay busy.
regards to the charging. So it's more about the microgrids thing, right? So then
They don't have
but they might not have
demand.
Yeah, there's no equipment. Unless you do like electric motorcycles.
Yeah.
Maybe they can use it for farming equipment. They have a lot of farming equipment. Different industries. They are
But e-bikes are good. E-bikes are
We
good.
can look more into it. What will be the design? What are the design that we are going to get for the first stage?
The pro forma house over there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're actually more structured in a way that you need to material specification.
Yeah, a little different.
All those things, right? Like kind of a design basis kind of, right?
Yeah, ours is just like.
Stage, which will be in Peru, but for that they are going to sponsor. Just for.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Post phase they are not sponsored.
Are there any figures in?
But that's the so you'll get funding.
We can check that.
So it's only for this stage and this
Yeah,
stage
exactly.
only?
Because of course everything is mostly not all, but they are interviewed. They might have selected me.
Okay.
So since and I believe the team that is finally going to go to Peru should not be more than 2. I think. But right now I am.
It's going to be expensive though.
They have some NGO. They are partnering with NGO.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah,
Okay.
of course, yeah, they are
Okay.
partnering with local.
I've never been to Peru. I'd love to see that place. Send me pictures.
And yeah, we'll be sending you pictures once we go.
I'd love to see that.
There also we have some cash money, so the winning team will have some.
For the first
Yeah,
round.
yeah.
First round.
You got to win first.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. You're going to do the interview, right?
Yeah.
Oh, set a chair over here, maybe. Or how do you want to do this in the front row, right? Turn around.
Yeah, like if we have the mic over there, maybe you can stand there.
Okay. Yeah, I guess this is where the mic is, so you should be close to that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Make sure your laptop's working.
Yeah,
All right, why don't we get started? I think we got some folks online. I think I see Susan. Susan, is that you? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, welcome, Susan. I'm going to be doing a quick agenda, go through some slides from Bill Aulette, and then I'll turn it over to you, maybe between 6:20 and 6:30, along with Vidita to do the interviews.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, all right, so today's agenda, I'm going to be going through Bill Aulette's steps, probably 4 or 5 steps, trying to catch up because we've been falling a little bit behind. We do have Susan Schofer. I think I've sent out her LinkedIn profile. Hopefully you've checked it out. Vidita here has volunteered to do the interview. So what's going to happen is we'll have 20 minutes from Susan, 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll have probably an equal amount of time interview from Vidita, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for the class. Okay, so the whole time allotment close to an hour. With that, after the break, I'm going to cover the case study. The case study was all about, as I recall, right, Valley of Death. So underlying death. And what's death to a startup, of course, is largely cash flow, right, or lack thereof. And there's lots of ways to remedy that, lots of ways around it, but in the end, that's the lifeblood of any startup. And obviously, if you have assets, if you've got something you can monetize, whether it's a product, a service, or you have people with expertise, or technology that you can license out, or you can possibly even sell time to your equipment. These are ways to buy you some time through this valley of death. This valley of death comes about because there's a shortage of capital from investors at certain stages. And at the same time, there's a shortage of revenue from customers, and you still have a tremendous amount of expenses, otherwise known as a burn rate. So your burn rate is high, right? And you have to somehow traverse this valley of death, which every successful startup has. And there's lots of funding sources, especially in the space of energy, right? So always keep in mind, SBIR, small business loans, small business grants, STTR, technology transfer grants. So there's all sorts of ways to get funding, federal government, as well as other sources. So these are called non-dilutive sources because they're not taking equity. Always look for those first, right? And then time permitting, I'll go through a very basic income statement. I don't want to insult you guys. I know we have color folks in the room and they can do this in their sleep. But many of you are engineers and you may not have seen an income statement in a while or may not understand what goes into it. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that. And then lastly, you'll have team time. So if all goes well, you'll have some time to work on your pitches, get ready for the next couple of weeks because we're getting close to the end here. Pull together whatever notes and whatever issues you might have working through as a team. I'm also probably going to ask each team to give maybe a 2-minute or 1-minute summary of their business in front of Susan so she knows who she's talking to, what teams are here. So we'll do that right before we introduce Susan, okay? With that, why don't we get started? Hopefully you guys can see my slides. I'm going to try to move this stuff around here. Okay, so whatever business you're in and you're defining as your initial market, right? Your beachhead market. Your beachhead is how you first enter the marketplace, right? It's not necessarily your long-term goal. It's a stepping stone. And as a stepping stone, it's got to be solid. It's got to be firm. It's got to be something that you know will work because you're going to use it to leverage into other markets, okay? So in the case of Tesla, we keep coming back to Tesla, but obviously he had a Roadster. Roadster was a very narrow beachhead market, right? Why was this solid for him? Why was the Roadster a solid beachhead for him? What made it a beachhead?
It was targeting people who were cash rich.
Yep.
And of course, he wanted to try this concept with people who are like early adopters, right? Like
Right.
innovators, like they don't really care about the mileage and stuff like that, but they just wanted to have the concept. And yeah.
So what would be the key to a beachhead market that, first of all, you're absolutely right, by the way, cash rich, right? Folks who had deep pockets, people who weren't that sensitive to the space inside the car. They're not interested in a family hauler. They're not interested in reliability. This is not going to be their daily driver. What are they interested in? Sports car. Fast, sexy, unusual, different. If you can check those boxes, you have a market that will pay a premium and pay ungodly amounts of money for a car that may not even be that reliable, may not even be all that safe, but these people aren't worried about safety or reliability, right? They're worried about bragging rights. Bragging rights. So it's a small market, but it was enough to get him subsidized, to get him funded, right? So with that, and actually he's gone through how many business models now? He's got these long-term business plans that he writes on a napkin. His first one was very simple, right? Introduce a sports car, introduce a sedan, introduce an affordable car, along with an SUV, right? And he's so far done every one of those things, knowing that each phase funds the next phase, right? Yes, he still brings in investor money. Yes, he's still bringing in his, his tax credits, right? He's using that as a subsidy as well. But in general, right, it's the funding from one car, the profit from one car that funds the next, right? Funds the next generation. You kind of wonder what's next after all this, because he's, not that he's hit a plateau, but he's now looking at Cybertruck. He's looking at kind of the next generation of all of his vehicles that need to be refreshed, right? And how's he going to generate new funding for that? Okay, so the broader TAM is all about understanding how that initial beachhead branches into all these other markets, okay? So I just basically described it for you, right? It's got the Model S, which is a different target market. Model S was families, right, of wealth, because this is still an expensive car, but it's no longer just bragging rights. This is now becoming a little bit more of a practical car, right? In fact, I knew one of our faculty who traded in all his other sports cars and fancy cars for his Model S, right? And he was, this was maybe 2014, it was early days, right? And he said, it's not that good in the snow. It's like, no kidding. Do you buy a Model S because it's good in the snow? He says, well, I tried to get snow tires, but everybody laughed at me. I was like, yeah, I would laugh too. So it's still a specialized car, but he's now expanding the market, right? So it's no longer just people on the coast with bragging rights, it's people getting back and forth to work, okay? And then from there it was, okay, make it more affordable, get into the middle class, if you will, or at least the upper middle class, and try to sell vehicles with the Model 3 and the Model Y that will appeal to a larger audience. By the way, did you know that today's Model 3 is priced lower than the average car selling price in the United States? The average car is about 49, and I believe the Model 3 is about 42, right? So it's significantly under the average. Think about that, right? So this is basically his business model in action, right? On top of that, there are rebates from the government. So he's got another backlog to worry about. He's got a backlog of vehicles that he needs to sell at the ship. The broader TAM is about expanding who you're going to do business with, okay? Even as late as a few years ago, Apple was expanding its TAM, right? By shipping products for other countries, right? That they've never seen the iPhone before, right? What does it take? Obviously, language compatibility, character sets, right? Potentially new apps that might be adapted to the local needs, right? Distribution models, how do you distribute in these countries? Selling price, all of it, concurrency conversion, everything has to be worked out. So entering a market sounds trivial. Ask Cook, right? This is what he does for a living. He's been opening up new markets and expanding the iPhone reach for the last 5-10 years, right? And it's all about all that stuff, right? Adapting the product, getting the channels in place, getting the distribution in place, all of it, pricing, warranty, legalities, everything. That's what this chart is really meant to represent. So if you had, for example, sunscreen for extreme athletes, these are people who might be swimming, think of triathletes, right? So they're swimming, they're biking, they're running, okay? They have very specific needs. But oh, by the way, this can be a very pricey product because you don't have that many triathletes in the world, but when you have daily use, it's a different set of requirements, right? A triathlon, it lasts how many hours? sunscreen for the entire day, that's a different matter, right? 5, 6 hours versus 24. Also, you have to think about the age groups, what kind of skin conditions they might have, right? What kind of use case they might be using it in, what kind of containers and what kind of advertising. All of it changes when you go even from this simple step of extreme athletes to daily use, right? And then understanding that, okay, you've got different conditions now that you're trying to accommodate and trying to support, right? So how do we know that this product's going to succeed? How do we know your business is going to succeed, right? You build it, they don't always come, right? In fact, that was the old engineering joke, right? Build it, they will come, and you always smile afterwards because you assume that somewhere between building it and selling it, that some sort of miracle occurs, right? That somehow marketing or some other magnetic attraction is going to bring customers to your product, okay? Once they see your product, especially an online product, what do they do with it? What's their behavior, right? Do they stick with it? Is it sticky? Do they come back? Do they stay with it for any long period of time? How do they interact? How deep do they go, right? And we were just talking about gaming, right? EA, Electronic Arts, right? How long do people play the game, right? How many levels are there? How many are at the final level, right? If there's 5 levels or 10 levels to the game, how many are already at level 5 or level 10? Did the developers already build out every level, or are some levels stubbed out, waiting for new software, okay? Are you staying ahead of your market, or is your market catching up to you, right? Do they get to a level and stop and then bolt, right? Level 3 and they're out of there? So these are good behaviors to know, right? These are good behaviors because you might want to feed it back to the engineers and say, you know what? After level 3, people lose interest, right? We got a lot of people at level 5. We better start building out level 6 real fast, right? Level 1 and they're done. There's something wrong with the game, right? How many hours do they spend? How many clicks are they doing? Are they coming back? Are they bringing their friends? Can you tell if they're bringing their friends? Can you create that social network to see if one player breeds others, right? Those sorts of questions. Will the dogs eat the dog food, right? What is getting, is it viral, right? Are they telling each other about it? Are they sticking with it, right? What do the numbers look like? This is where my startup failed. I had a project management startup, some software in the cloud that was designed to help people build teams and contract with each other. If you've heard of freelance or elance.com, we were competing with them, okay? Oh, we weren't. They were eating our lunch, right? This is where we failed, right? We were building a product for ourselves and not the market. This is a classic engineering mistake, right? Don't ever assume that you as engineers, as product designers, as product managers, that you represent the market. You don't. You can look at yourself, oh, I am the market. It's like, yeah, you're marketing one. That's not going to move the needle. Listen to your market. Watch and analyze your analytics, right? In fact, we have an entire class now on marketing analytics, especially in the digital world. You can tell so much, right? How many people come to your site? How long do they stay? Where do they go? When they leave, where do they leave to, right? All their dynamics, everything is there. You can learn so much by marketing analytics, right? New visitors, returning visitors, stickiness, all of it, right? Number of users. This is why startups, especially in this space, the digital space, are so obsessed with revenue. Actually, they're not obsessed with revenue, they're actually obsessed with user count. You would think they'd be obsessed with revenue, right? Where's the money? They're giving it away in many cases, right? Has anyone tried Exponent? The website that MEM engaged with? They cared more about how many users we were bringing them versus the dollars we were paying them. They were more interested in getting more users than more dollars. Why? Because of this. Because of curves like this, right? What are their investors worried about? Everything I just described, stickiness, right? The pickup rate. the user count, right? The growth, the slope of the curve. And the dollars, ironically, are secondary. Why is that?
Because I would say like, sorry.
Go ahead. It's the time you started first, so.
I think that it's more about the customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
If the customer sticks to you more, eventually they might not be profitable to you, but as they stay with you longer, they're
Right.
gonna increase, exactly result in the curve that you showed here.
Right.
And secondly, I would say like many companies just try to have more broader user base so that they can eventually sell to a larger company because they are
Right.
giving a large collection of the users to the company that is acquiring them eventually.
Right.
So it's that could be possibly their long-term, like their immediate goal, right? Okay, have a customer base and then let us sell it to the company, because the other company will see like, okay, I have this many users already.
And it's the users that are so vital to this business, right? And we'll get to why in a minute. I guess you had your hand up? Or no?
It's mostly similar related to what's the customer life cycle value. So every customer, depending upon the churn rate, it will have a life cycle value. And if the churn rate is very low, then eventually you will get the money. But how much easily you are getting a new customer and how much they are sticking to you, that's what.
Well, you saw my video, I think, on lifetime value and customer acquisition costs, and like all of that is absolutely correct. But if you don't charge them enough, your lifetime value isn't high enough, right? So somewhere, sometime, the money has got to come into the equation. Back there and then perfect.
Probably if we can give good experience to the existing users, automatically they'll refer to a lot of people. It just multiplies.
Right.
And probably since they are in the very beginning phase of their company, right?
And this is the essence of viral marketing, right? So one person can get 5 or 6 others, and then those 5 or 6 others get 5 or 6 others each, and it becomes like a virus, right? And that's what viral marketing is all about. But sooner or later, there's got to be revenue, right? Is this where you're going? No.
Actually, the one was word of mouth, and second was probably since they want to try to better their product by getting more and more customers to use it,
Right.
maybe for free, so that they can enhance their product experience to the new upcoming.
So the more you bring in, the more you'll learn, right? You can reduce more friction, you can make it a better experience, and then you can get faster and faster growth, right? But still, sooner or later, the money has to be there. So where does the money come from? Once they're hooked, you can either do advertising, which kicks in at a certain level of penetration in terms of number of eyeballs, right? Or you can start doing a subscription model. We'll talk about business models in a few moments. The subscription model, once they're hooked, they're willing to pay small amounts of money as long as it's on a monthly basis. Well, $5 or $10 a month times 1 million users, that's a lot of money, right? The third one that maybe you don't think about is valuation. How do you value a company that's digital? Right, one way to value it is look at the customer acquisition costs. Let's assume for a moment it's $200, okay? Now, look at the number of users. Let's assume, for simplicity, they got 1 million users. $200 million business. Does that make sense? Maybe. There's no physical assets, right? Hardly, measurable revenue. But if a company wanted to acquire you and they were only interested in your user base, that's all they cared about, and it cost you, theoretically, $200 million, or it would cost them $200 million to get the same user base, then theoretically that is the value for the company, right? Counter arguments? If I'm wrong, tell me. But this is how some companies will look at it. Now, maybe not physical, hardware oriented, or even utility type companies that rely on revenue. No. These are the digital startups, right? Maybe the ones that are right now getting slammed by both the marketplace and their employment numbers, right? But this is how that early stage growth, it's all about early stage growth, okay? They focus on that, and so far it's worked. It's worked for them, it works for their investors, right? Usage and retention, right? Once you have them, do they stay with you? How much does it cost you to get them? How fast are you getting them on board, right? Engaged users, click-through rate, repeat visitors. These are the mantras of the industry, right? What is your uniqueness? What's your competitive advantage? I think we've kind of talked about this to some extent with patents, right? Intellectual property. Whenever an investor says, what is your competitive advantage? You better talk about IP at some point in your answer, right? You can say we're faster, we're better, we're cheaper. God help you if you're cheaper. You're going to have to show a structural reason why you're cheaper, because the incumbent is almost always going to have the volume advantage over the startup. So unless you have some sort of radical new technology, a new material, for example, or a new construction method, a new architecture, it's going to be hard to make the cheaper argument, okay? Some of you might be able to. The flip side is, faster, sure, new technology should be faster. Is that valued by the market? Are they going to pay you for it? Is it better? Is it measurably better? Do you have, in essence, a competitive advantage that you can quantify?
Professor, to this point, in the recent case study that we did, the Solintra had a unique competitive advantage as compared to the other PV cells.
Right.
But probably they got bankrupt because of the flooding of the cheaper Chinese PV motors.
Right.
So having a competitive advantage still does holds when there are many more cheaper.
Well, it kind of depends on the overall techno-economics of the system, right? So if you're 50% more efficient, but your panel costs 90% more or 100% more, the techno-economics may not pencil out, right? So am I better off building out cheaper panels as opposed to more expensive panels, right? So you have to think of it from the systems perspective, put yourself in the customer's, viewpoint, right? If I have a surgical instrument that lets me get through a surgery instead of an hour in 20 minutes, I can do 3 surgeries when I used to do 1. What's the advantage? I'm tripling the revenue for the surgeon and for the hospital and everybody that surrounds me, right? I'm tripling the throughput. That's how you look at it. So faster can be cheaper, faster can be better, depending on the context, right? So understand it from the customer's view, see if you can quantify it from their perspective, right? But the ultimate competitive advantage that's going to secure your beachhead, that's going to secure you for the long run, is some sort of IP. Because if I just say I got a better surgical tool, you could look at it in 5 minutes and say, I can reverse engineer this. Give me $500,000 and we're in the market, right? Maybe you can build it somewhere cheaper. Maybe you can find a better material than I'm using, right? And suddenly you're winning the business and I'm losing it, right? So without the IP, it's just another lemonade stand, right? Everyone wants to open a lemonade stand, right? Pizza delivery, you name it, right? There's a million ideas out there. Most of them are not protectable. Most of them cannot be protected from anyone who's got a little bit more money or the incumbent who can pivot, right? I want to compete with Uber. How am I going to do that? Well, let's see. Maybe I'll just have them, I don't know, Uber pairs, where I've got pairs of people that are driving me around. Just like, well, Uber can pivot there in 5 minutes. If it makes sense, they'll do it. If it doesn't make sense, they'll watch you pivot, right? So take your pick. If it's not protected, the only way to really win is velocity, right? Speed. Get there ahead of everyone else. This was Uber's claim to fame. Lyft came a little bit, I think a little bit later, right? Trying to catch up to Uber. By Uber penetrating all these markets so quickly and getting their name out there and getting the brand recognition. Brand does give you some momentum. Brand gives you some advantage, but what's the long-term advantage? It's going to have to be in investing in keeping that brand pristine, right? Apple is Apple. There's not much you can say about it except they've kept their brand pristine, right? High-tier product, no discounts, right? No cheaper versions, operating system under their control, the entire ecosystem under their control, very tightly controlled around their sense of quality, their sense of user experience, okay? Some of that can be patented, much of it cannot. It's Apple being Apple. Sony can try, right? And Samsung can try, right? And in some cases, they've done pretty well, but what's going to be your advantage? Is it brand? Is it first to market? Is it velocity? Is it some sort of IP that protects you long term? 15, 28.
So Lyft is still able to survive even though Uber was there. So maybe if you have some backing, then you can survive.
So how did Lyft survive with Uber there? Any idea?
Maybe the sponsors.
Yeah, there are always people who look for a cheaper options.
Okay, cheaper.
When Lyft gives an option, probably people will switch.
Was Lyft always cheaper? Wasn't always cheaper.
No,
but
I mean, we always tend to see both, whichever is cheaper, we go for that.
Okay.
Probably the competition here, if not Uber, Lyft, that's all right. We don't have the third option here.
Right. I'll tell you why I'm a Lyft customer, not Uber. They treated their drivers better. When the drivers treated better, they treat the customers better. I would walk into a car, they would give me a bottle of water every time. Lyft, not Uber, Lyft. The Lyft drivers were smiling, the Uber drivers generally were not, right? I'd ask the Lyft drivers, how do you like being a Lyft driver? Oh, I've done both, and Lyft treats me better. They treat me like a human being, right? Those things matter, right? And when everything else is equal, how do you compare, right? Does Lyft have the same footprint? Does Lyft have the same marketing? Do they have the same quantity of vehicles on the road? Pricing, convenience, how about the app itself? I had trouble with the Uber app. Never with the Lyft app. Right? So there was reason after reason for why I picked Lyft. Maybe because I'm generally attracted to the underdog, right? The second instead of the first, because I'm thinking the second has to try harder and the first doesn't, right?
Is it because of the early mover advantage to the Uber? Because it's still not profitable, by the way.
No, it's not problem.
Neither should be Lyft or.
Neither is Lyft or any of these others, but is there an early mover advantage? Yes, and that's what I mean by velocity. It's not just getting there first, it's staying ahead, right? And I'll be honest with you, as we sit here today, I'm worried about Tesla's velocity, right? They got products that are 5 years old, 6 years old. Their age is showing, right? The new cars coming out of Korea. If you don't believe me, look at the Ioniq 6. Ioniq 6 is amazing. There's nothing else out like it. I mean, it does not look like a Tesla, right? It makes Tesla look antiquated, right? And when's Tesla going to refresh? That's my constant question. Well, they still have to get the Cybertruck out. They
That's
still
why
have.
they're discounting the Tesla.
They're discounting Teslas. What does that tell you? Is it commoditization?
Rid of their inventory.
They got to move inventory. They got factories they have to basically move product from. So yeah, and they're also trying to take advantage of the $7,500 from the government. So
That's very good.
Yep. Any other comments about competitive advantage, uniqueness in the marketplace, right? It can come from brand. It can come from, early penetration, first mover advantage. It can come from velocity. It can come from constant renewal and bringing in new products. I mean, that's what both Hyundai and Kia are doing. They've rebranded themselves, right? They've refreshed themselves. They saw this as a way to shed their old gasoline guzzling image, right? Whatever quality or reliability issues, they've set that aside. New brand, new marketing, new packaging, new design language. You look at the vehicle and it looks different than anything they've ever done before, okay? And they put their thumbprint on it and say, this is not your old Hyundai, this is not your old Kia, right? And they're competing with, guess what? Yesterday's Tesla. So I think they've got, and one more thing they've done that nobody's thought of is financing, right? In this industry, in the auto industry, if you can find a unique way to finance, they just announced $699 monthly, no commitment rentals, if you want to call it that, kind of a lease, but it's a lease that's month to month. So if you want to get yourself Ioniq 5, $699 or is it $899? It's one of those two will get you a monthly, pay as you go type program. And if you don't like it after a few months, just cut it off, no penalty, right? Unlike any other lease or any other financing, how does this advantage them over Tesla? Tesla doesn't finance. You bring cash to a Tesla, or you bring your own finance.
But do you think this financing thing is a long-term sustainable model? Because once let us say as a user, you return the car back, what value does the car have for the company?
They can lease it to somebody else, right? I don't think
The
the
valuation it's depreciated, right? Like you cannot lease for the same amount, maybe.
I think they can because they've already discounted it to begin with, $699 or $899. These are good prices, right? So I think they're gonna have basically an inventory of vehicles that they lease. Is it a competitive advantage? As long as Tesla steadfastly refuses to lease, this is an advantage. So Tesla's strategy creates opportunities for everyone around Tesla. And that's always true with the lead dog, right? With the lead company in the market, you can look at their decisions, their policies, and say, you know what, we can take advantage of these and work in their vacuum, right? It happened to Motorola. We were always lead company in certain industries, and there were always companies behind us that were picking up the scraps and saying, okay, Motorola won't do this, Motorola won't do that, we will, right? In fact, Lucid was known for this, right? So they would have extra long warranties on their product because we didn't have long warranties, we had shorter warranties, right? They would guarantee total cost of operation, we wouldn't at Motorola. So just figuring out what the leader does and then basically agreeing to do what they won't do, right? There's a market for that. So again, we talk about patents, right? We have to understand when those patents expire. I've got students working on drugs, right? This is a big thing in the drug business. When your patent expires, it goes generic. When it goes generic, everybody can jump on it and take that formulation to market at a fraction of the cost, right? Because they don't have R&D expense. You've got the R&D expense. You have to recover it over what, 10, 12, 15 years. So you're gonna have a high-priced drug, suddenly go to a very, very cheap drug, unless you come in with some alteration, some embellishment, some change that can warrant a patent. So we've talked about this. Let me finish up with business models. This is how you capture value from what you've created, right? So this is how you monetize your invention, your product, your service, right? The freemium model, as you all know, right? My favorite example of Dropbox, right? 2 gigabytes, is it 2 gigabytes? 2 gigabytes or 20 gigabytes? It's free. Then above that, they charge you by the month, right? The Teams Dropbox is more expensive. So they keep tearing you up, right? As you get more and more embodied into the Dropbox ecosystem, they start charging you. But for the vast majority of the users, it's free because you're using basic level services, right? The advertising model, right? I use Google all the time. I use all these, Yahoo and Yahoo Mail and all this stuff. It's all driven mostly by advertising. And that's where the eyeballs matter. And that's where that first discussion we had about why are user counts so important, it's because of advertising. Association with other brands, right? I mean, I normally wear my boots to, this snowy weather, right? The Vibram brand is about soles, but they attach themselves to Columbia, which is about shoes and other clothing, right? So can you attach your brand to another brand that already has an established value in the market, right? And then the ad-free mobile app, they do generate revenue from those 99-cent charges. Monthly subscription models, daily use models. I just mentioned the model with Hyundai, right? Which, by the way, I've never seen before. Maybe some of you have seen it, but a monthly fee, no long-term commitment, flat rate, no buyback provisions or any of this stuff. If you don't like it, just turn it in, stop paying your monthly fee. You're done, right? No commitment. Never heard of that before. That's a company that either believes in their product or they're desperate to get it out there. I'm not sure which, but I think they're worried that they weren't eligible for the rebate from the government, which normally requires you to have a sale. So if you're not selling, they're going to lease. They're going to make lease work. They have to make lease work. This is a no frills and also no issue lease, right? Comments about business models. All I can say is adapt your business model to the needs of your market, right? Adapt them to the situation at hand. Like Hyundai recognizes they're not going to qualify for the rebate. What can they do to make their cars attractive? Lower the barrier of entry, right? I went to the auto show. Hyundai's, INE5s on a racetrack, right? People lining up to try out an electric car. People have never driven an electric car before, right? Hooking them early, making it easy for them, making it affordable, reducing friction, reducing anything that impedes them from getting that car, including a down payment, including a huge loan or huge, effectively a mortgage, right? Susan, we ready to pivot to you?
Hello, yes.
All right.
I feel like that was a crash course in everything you need to know to be an entrepreneur.
I wish you were, then I wouldn't need the other 9 weeks in the course. Just a small slice of what these guys need, but hopefully that wasn't too boring for you. I guess Susan Schofer, I know you've been working in this space of entrepreneurship for a long time, especially technology entrepreneurship. I will turn it over to you and you can share your screen. Or do I need
Awesome.
something on my side?
No, I can share my screen. I mean, I thought I would just give a quick intro to myself. I'll give an introduction to SOSV and HAX, which is my current employer. And then I guess we'll have an open discussion a bit about questions that someone has come up with, that Vidita has come up with. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about myself quickly first, and then I'll give you guys a bit of background on the current company I work for, which is a venture capital firm investing in very early stage deep tech and hard technologies. So yeah, actually, I have roots in exactly where you guys are sitting today. I grew up in Wilmette. My father was an engineering professor at Northwestern for my entire life, and now is an emeritus professor of engineering, civil engineering. So yeah, it's great to be talking to, Northwestern students, and exciting what you guys are learning, because I think what you're learning, if I understand, is that you're coming from more of like engineering background and trying to learn entrepreneurship and sort of the business side in order to think about how you might approach starting a business or joining a startup or something like that. Anyway, so given that I myself was raised by academics, or an academic, I studied chemistry as an undergrad and then really did not know what one did with themselves other than go pursue a PhD. So I did go pursue my PhD in chemistry, went to Caltech for that. And that was a great experience, really enjoyed, having the opportunity to be deep on the science side and really learning fundamentals. I studied catalysis and kind of polymers. So that was a really fun experience, but definitely very academic. And coming out of that, I wasn't quite sure, what I really wanted to do. And I had the inkling that maybe academia was not for me, but honestly, did not know what other things there were to do in the world. So I did spend a year as a postdoc working on some artificial photosynthesis, but then was very lucky to kind of land myself in industry at a startup that was a little bit bigger, so just post IPO, but using some automation and robotic systems to do high throughput discovery to accelerate development of new materials, new polymers, and new catalysts. So that was really a very light bulb experience for me. I think the first thing I discovered once I moved from academia into industry was that, science and technology, which are definitely something I love, it's super exciting to actually use science and technology to do something that has an impact in the broader world. So that's a really fun experience, which I really enjoyed. The second piece was just, I think one thing that's really fun about startups and entrepreneurship is that you have the opportunity to work as a team. And it's just a great way to really combine different skills and resources in order to do something greater ultimately than an individual could do on their own. But my biggest learning that was really obvious to me when I first really joined this company working in industry was that while science and technology are very fundamental to innovation in many cases, that alone was not enough to really make an impact and bring innovation to market. So I think those are all the things that you guys are learning in this course, which is just so many considerations as you go to commercialize technology. Obviously the tech matters and the science matters and you have to have something unique, but there's a lot more considerations. And the biggest one probably to think about as you're coming from more of a technical background is starting to get in that mindset and figuring out how you start to understand the customer and the market and what are their considerations, right? So I think one big challenge coming from a more technical background is how you start to communicate what you're doing in the right context and the right language that can communicate to those who are ultimately going to buy and use your product, what matters to them, what is their use case, what are they doing day to day. I think that's really important to get in that mindset and or partner with those who can bring that perspective, because otherwise I think it's easy to think about how exciting your tech is, and that's great, but you really need to understand the customer and what their point of view is. So for me, that was the beginning, I think, of a long journey that I've been pursuing throughout my career, which is really taking, starting as an R&D scientist, but really moving through into looking at different parts of the business, working on product development, working on product management, and really understanding, again, like how you set specifications for new products in an existing market, and then working on the commercial side. So been about 5 years at a startup, like I was saying, in high throughput and accelerated discovery of new polymers and catalysts. Spent about 5 years at a company called Amyris, which is one of the pioneers of synthetic biology in Emeryville, a spin out from Jay Kiesling's lab. And there I was really focused on product development and made the big jump from being scientist in the lab to being on the commercial side and working in technical product management, working closely with customers, and then doing broader business development. And then in 2014, I joined an early stage company called Modern Meadow, one of the pioneers again of leather, but without any animals. So thinking about how we can create protein and put that together to make a leather material that's new and innovative, but also more sustainable. And my role there was really on the leadership team, as well as leading commercialization and business development. So got the unique experience of really working with some pretty cool customers in the luxury and performance space and trying to bridge the gap between early stage biotech and material science and customers that were very much thinking themselves about consumer product and things that they were putting out into the world that were made out of leather and other materials. And then currently I'm a partner at SOSV, a global venture capital firm, as well as Chief Science Officer for HAX. And HAX is our hard tech startup development program. So I will share my screen here and give you a quick overview of HAX. Can you guys see that?
Yep, looks good. We got it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this. So HAX is a startup development program. We are the world's most active investor in hard tech. I can tell you a bit about what we mean by hard tech. Our roots are very much in hardware, and that's our unique capability, is really helping early stage hard technology teams to build hardware. We have our own team of engineers that works directly with teams to help them take early stage prototypes and early stage technology and turn that into something that's ready to go to their customers and really get some traction, proving that they really have a product and are more commercial ready. HAX is a part of SOSV, which is a global VC fund. We're focused on hard tech and life sciences. SOSV, we're currently starting to invest out of Fund 5, actually, just starting in 2023. SOSV has over $1.5 billion of assets under management. And the way we invest is through startup development programs. So what that means is we initially deploy capital through these programs. One of them is IndieBio, which I think has a little bit more name recognition in the United States. And the other one is HAX. So IndieBio is focused on life sciences. HAX is focused on hard tech. And, we work with companies, early stage pre-seed companies, to help them de-risk their technologies. We work with them in a very hands-on way. As I was saying, on the HAX side, we actually help them really with engineering and building prototypes, but also, help them with their business strategy, help them identify first markets, help them de-risk the technology, and help them to figure out overall strategy, fundraising strategy, how they start to hire and build a team. And then we do follow on invest into subsequent rounds. So we start at pre-seed, but we'll go through seed and Series A. Ultimately, over the lifetime of our companies, invest over up to like $5 to $7 million in each of these companies, and really follow them through their development.
Susan, I jump in and
yeah.
just mention that one of my teams, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago, on a hardware device that would basically attach to your electrical panel and provide software intelligence to it, was accepted into HAX, which I understood to be a hardware accelerator that it was multinational in nature. And I think they got into the one in Shanghai. And the story they
Yep.
told me was they were admitted for a period of time. I think let's say 6 months, right? So in 6 months, their job was to develop their product, their prototype into a product. And what they did in 6 months in Shanghai would have taken them years to do anywhere else. And I asked them, why is that? And they said, well, they had a laboratory right next to a factory. So if I needed something, you know, in the morning, they could spend the afternoon working on it in the factory. And they could iterate between the factory and the lab on a daily basis. And they said it was a huge benefit to them in terms of actually creating a product, right? A producible product.
Yeah, I mean, exactly as you're saying, I think not Shanghai, but Shenzhen in China is where our main site has been up until now, or up until the past year. So like the reason for Shenzhen is exactly as you're saying, like strategic sourcing, the fact that there's so much manufacturing there, it's easy to get parts quickly. There's really a much more of a manufacturing mindset. You can find the parts that you need on the electronics and the hardware side much more quickly, much more economically. And we have an experienced team that now has a track record over the past 10 years of really helping teams to build at this early stage. And it really does make a difference because like you're saying, going from 0 to 1 with hardware is quite hard. And that's how we really believe we can give teams a unique advantage. So we tend to look at investments across a pretty broad spectrum of topics. Human and planetary health is really our thesis overall. And what that means for us is that about 70% of our portfolio is climate tech and industrials, and about 30% is in healthcare. And in the case of HAX, that's really more on the med device side, because again, hardware is really the key thing that we can unlock. This is just a bit about our program, but I think the other thing is about a year and a half ago, we started building our first site in the US where we'll have a physical space. So we're building in Newark, New Jersey. We picked that site after kind of a search across the US as to where we wanted to have our headquarters. For a variety of reasons. You know, Newark has an industrial history. There's lots of desire to really create an innovation hub in Newark, and a new kind of the future of tech and the future of manufacturing. And also we have some pretty generous funding from the New Jersey EDA to really support our growth there. So they've contributed $25 million to help us build our site. So we're in the midst of building that site. And in the meantime, we're kind of up and running with about now 12, almost 15 startups co-working in our space. So, you know, we definitely have this global presence. We'll continue to have the presence in Shenzhen for strategic sourcing, but at this point, any teams that join the program have the opportunity to come work with us in Newark. So it's pretty fun and cool. And unfortunately, right now I'm in my bedroom, not at my office, but I would love to have the chance to show you guys the space that we're building because it's quite industrial and unique. But again, what's unique about us is just that we have fairly technical staff. Here's our team. You know, we have mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, mechatronics. We also have chemical engineers and people who really have operational experience. So it's a pretty unique team to be able to help anyone who's building in hard tech. And you know, one thing we fundamentally believe is that hard tech is the prerequisite for making a difference in human and planetary health. And I guess I wanted to share with you guys a bit about some of our themes here. I'm going to actually skip ahead. So, you know, one theme is within healthcare and diagnostics, and really thinking about how do we do more non-invasive predictive diagnostics that can really help people on the healthcare side to be able to understand problems before they really get to be bigger problems, as well as just, you know, sort of revolutionize healthcare in terms of robotics, new therapeutics, diagnostics, using things like AI and ML. The other big themes for us are really, a lot of them are around robotics, automation, just figuring out new ways to be able to address some of the labor challenges that we see, as well as kind of the industrialization challenges in some of these industries that otherwise are struggling to scale. I'll skip to this one, which is really a big one and a big theme that we're continuing to go deep on, which is around decarbonizing manufacturing. So obviously this is a big theme broadly that we're quite interested in, and just how do we really decarbonize manufacturing. I'll give you an example of one of our companies, which is called SmartX. So SmartX uses computer vision to be able to actually monitor textile knitting process, which is happening on like a automated knitting machine. And one of the problems that can happen in that industry is that as the knitting machine is going along, errors can occur. They're not really noticed. And so you continue to propagate, you end up with a roll of textile at the end, which has, a propagated error throughout it. And so it ends up actually being waste. That's not necessarily even noticed at that point. That textile then goes into a dyeing process. And only at that point is it really recognized that, hey, there's an error in here, and this entire roll of textile is waste. So SmartX is able to use the computer vision and the AI to really be able to detect those errors as they occur and correct them so that you don't propagate all of that and have all that waste. So that's one example of just a company that's really using smart technology to be able to have a big impact on decarbonization of manufacturing and less waste. Another big theme is around energy transition. And, I'll talk about another company here, Pulsenix. Pulsenix is able to get real-time data on electrochemical systems. So electrochemistry is critical to the energy transition, right? As we're trying to electrify all these industries, we're going to be heavily reliant on electrochemistry. But today, there's really no way to be able to monitor that in real time. So what that means is, surprisingly, and we've just been working closely with this team over the past week, working on their messaging and how they really pitch the business that they're creating. But what it ultimately means is that although electricity is quite industrialized, electrochemistry is really not in a position to be industrialized and scaled because we have no way to monitor it, which kind of means that we're flying blind as we try to implement all these electrochemical systems, as we look at electrolyzers to produce hydrogen, as we try to look at batteries and their performance. There's a lot of wasted resources around, backup systems that we may or may not need, errors or inefficiencies that are occurring that we're not detecting. So Pulsenix is able to really help revolutionize that, and they've had very good traction there. Other big themes that are of interest to us are highlighted here. One of them is the company Green Lion, which is working on battery recycling. So waste to value, I think, is a pretty huge theme for us that we're looking at a lot. Obviously, battery recycling is a big one and a growing field, as well as just plastic recycling and new methods to do plastic recycling on a lower energy basis. Another large theme for us is critical minerals. Just how finding new ways to refine ore and other natural resources to get the minerals that we need. So copper is having massive amount of growth in demand, and we don't have any real ways to get more of it out of the earth other than digging up more earth, which ultimately is challenging. So finding new ways to extract copper and refine it is a big theme for us.
That challenge you just described is huge. We're talking, isn't it close to almost an order of magnitude more copper that's going to be needed in the next 5 to 10 years because of electrification of vehicles as well as almost everything else in our society, and also the expansion of the grid that supports the electrification.
Yeah, absolutely. The demand for copper is huge. It's not officially listed as a critical mineral, I think, by the US DOE actually yet, unlike a lot of other things that are like rare earth elements and lithium and stuff. But yeah, copper and the demand is going to be huge. So that's a big one. So we just invested in a company that's using an electrochemical approach to be able to isolate copper from chalcopyrite, which is like a part of the ore that they have, but now it's kind of either going to waste or needs to be shipped abroad. One of the big challenges in mining is that we've offshored a lot of that activity because it's a fairly dirty business. So I think a big theme here around all the manufacturing and thinking about how we reinvent the next generation of manufacturing is how we bring those industries back to a more distributed being more distributed around the globe, enabling local manufacturing, but part of that is reinventing the approach to manufacturing and refining and things like that so that it can be practiced, here in the US or wherever it's really needed, so that we can be a lot more eco-friendly and sustainable about that. I'll talk briefly about this one. I mean, mobility and transport is another big area that again needs like improvements in terms of efficiencies. One company that we've invested in that's now at have raised a Series A couple of years ago is Neptune Robotics. They've developed basically a Roomba for being able to clean the bottom of ship hulls because so much biomass builds up and it really puts a lot of drag on the ship and makes it much less efficient as it's moving through the ocean. So they basically have the ability to send a robot down there and clean off the bottom of these ships to make them much more efficient. And then maybe finally is around building systems. We have a company here called R0 that was a sort of 2020 pandemic era company that's using UVC, basically a much more sustainable non-chemical way to disinfect surfaces. They kind of had great timing in terms of when they started this business right before COVID started, but they've had a huge amount of growth being able to just use a non-chemical way to disinfect places like have really deployed in schools, within airlines, and raised a Series B in 2021, and I think are just in the midst of raising or finished raising their Series C just a little bit ago. So anyway, that's an overview of the types of areas we're interested in, and I think would be happy to talk to any of you guys as you're thinking about your potential business ideas and talk about how we work and or just send you in whatever right direction there is to help support your entrepreneurial ideas.
So thank you, that was excellent, well done. Let's give her a round of applause. Before we move to Vidita, I guess while Vidita sets up, I'm thinking, why don't we have the teams introduce themselves very quickly, maybe a minute per 3HN. Do you want to go first? Go ahead. Just a minute.
Our team is 3HN. We are doing producing ammonia from CAC cell, a new kind of battery technology which integrates the production of hydrogen and synthesis of ammonia in a single cell. Unlike many other underlying technologies which they have, is they do in a Haber-Bosch process. There are two different processes. We are trying to combine all this thing in a single cell and finding a market for this.
Got it. That's based on Northwestern technology.
It's based on Northwestern technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And originally they were looking at using the hydrogen as a fertilizer. Now they're looking at it as an energy storage capability, right? Yeah. So that's specifically your business model. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Food Sure.
Is it through a catalysis system or is it through? How are you getting the hydrogen?
We are not getting hydrogen directly. We are synthesizing ammonia from water and the nitrogen from air directly in a single cell.
Gotcha.
Okay, Sure, next. Go ahead. Make sure you speak up, Susan.
Yep. Hi, Susan. Food Sure, we're a educational hydroponic kit intended for middle schools. The way that it's designed, it's an entire package. So along with the kit that has the container, the seeds and nutrients, it also has a sensor that we want to connect with an application for teachers. So those that may not have agriculture or food growth experience, they're still empowered to bring this to the classroom, especially for middle schools that don't have those kind of programs already established or those that are in their infancy, and just kind of spreading out that knowledge of advanced indoor farming systems as opposed to just traditional outdoor farming.
Okay, thank you. Nano Energy.
Maybe I'll talk at the end only.
You'll do it at the end? Okay, that sounds good. Terra.io.
Oh, yes, Susan, thank you for coming in. We are Terra.io. We are looking to provide a service to obtain carbon credits for farmers. The integration of enhanced rock weathering materials to sequester carbon. Really looking to streamline the measuring, auditing, registering process for farmers to make it a little more convenient and accessible, while also providing information on soil condition qualities for soil health and to increase crop yields.
All right. And lastly, waste share.
Hi, Susan. Thanks for coming in for the nice presentation. We are a team waste tracker. Our aim is to provide a digital platform where we intend to connect the restaurant owners, the retailers, as well as the farmers to help them connect with the consumers which are interested in buying their food items which are near expiring at discounted rates, of course. And the second part of our mission is to partner with companies to introduce the image processing technologies that will help detect the shelf life of food items, so that the retailers and restaurant owners can help prevent the wastage of their food, the produce and the items like that.
You can consider my kitchen, I guess, a pilot for your business.
Yeah, that's right.
My fridge is constantly accumulating all sorts of food that gets wasted. So nice job. I guess I'll turn it over to Vidita at this point and let her interview Susan and maybe talk a little bit about her startup as well.
So good evening, everyone. Finally, I got a chance to talk to you. So let me introduce myself. I'm Vidita with a team of 2 people with me. So we are working on a startup on a technology that is developed over here at Northwestern University itself. So this is a patent by one of the chemistry professor over here. This is about nano energy, is about like using nanofilms to generate electricity when they come in contact with water at very high speed and having a high surface area. So that's the requirement of the technology, that you need to have high surface area and high speed water coming into it. So yeah, like we are developing some prototypes and trying to optimize on the energy generation from that, and we'll be collaborating with some sort of existing renewable energy technologies in the wave energy for the first prototypes, and then we'll be moving forward with expansion.
So the mechanism of energy, like, is it through electricity or more like through solar, like photonic?
So it's more from like water, because if some aqueous solution flows to the surface of nanofilm, it will generate electricity.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting.
The hardest part with this business is figuring out the right application. I mean, they've been everywhere from wave energy to US Navy to you name it, all sorts of applications, and finding the right one that pencils out techno-economically is the tough part.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think you're right. That's always the challenge, I guess, is finding that first market and figuring out kind of what your roadmap looks like.
Yep.
Right. So coming to your profile, I just walked through your profile, and I was just curious to know, like, since the starting, I felt that you had a passion for innovation. Like you started with researching and patenting, and even you were an undergrad research over here at Northwestern. Then you became scientist, and then you further developed, like you had new business development identification, and you brought new researches in your current profile into like in the SOSV. So bringing in new researches into the market. So like which phase of your life did you enjoy the most, starting till the end?
Which phase did I enjoy the most? That's a really good question. I think all of it. I've been lucky to have a lot of fun along the way. all along. I think, for me, like I was saying earlier, the biggest learning as I started out in industry was just how important like the other pieces of the puzzle were beyond just the technology itself. So I think I just got really curious about like how to interact with customers and partnerships and how to think about early go-to-market and communications. I guess one thing that I got to do that was a lot of fun is when I joined Modern Meadow and was first sort of building out the commercialization plan as well as like working on business development. I got to create some pretty unique partnerships. There is this concept of like biobucks in pharma where there's kind of like a known mechanism to like partner between a small biotech company and a large pharma company to put some dollars against the innovation that the biotech is developing for exclusivity towards that technology and use of that in particular applications in the drug world. That business model had then been used in like synthetic biology to try to like utilize it for some development of certain types of yeast strains to make certain types of products. So at my company Amyris, we use that to like look at the flavors and fragrance space where we were able to kind of carve up different applications areas there, get some upfront non-dilutive funding from partners to show that they were interested in those spaces and then develop against those with some milestones that were defined in order to de-risk and then ultimately looking to create a supply agreement and sell product. So I think that business model existed in pharma, it was taken into the more industrial biotech space. And then at Modern Meadow, we did some work to take that even further to like brands that I think typically don't really use that model. So luxury and performance brands that we were working with, trying to find ways to work directly with them at a very early stage when we had very limited technology capabilities, but to show that, hey, they're very interested in a new leather material, something that's animal free, but also not made of plastic, just to be able to demonstrate that traction and then find ways to de-risk along the way. So I guess that was a lot of fun just trying to craft those partnerships because they were very unique and novel. And then really getting into the weeds of how to kind of negotiate through that, building the relationship and then building all the pieces that go underneath it to really stand up a partnership and get some demonstration of commercial traction, even at an earlier stage before we had our technology fully developed. That was definitely a lot of fun.
Interesting. I see a lot of folks over here belong from chemistry and material science background, some from Kellogg School of Management. So like we have a mix over here and we are just curious to know like what was the role of PhD and postdoc in your further development in your career? Like,
what was the role? Say again what you just said. What was the role of my PhD?
Yeah, PhD, postdoc, and further scientist studies in your further development, like career.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, first of all, I think, if you have the opportunity to study science and to really immerse yourself in that education, I think it's a really great opportunity and there's lots of learning there. For me, I enjoyed the time of my PhD because it allowed me to really be deep in the science and studying like mechanisms of how things worked, taking a problem from very much end to end, like defining a problem, coming up with a hypothesis, making an experimental plan, executing experiments, getting results, and then kind of conclusions and next steps. I think that process generally, that scientific method, is valuable to really any discipline because it's just a structured way of thinking. So, I think the two things that I think are most beneficial are just having that experience deeply immersed in one field just gave me a deep understanding of that field, which I think kind of is always valuable to me in terms of how I think about new problems and having that experience solving problems end to end, structuring them. Even though it's academic research, you're still kind of on the hook to present at group meeting to kind of walk through your thinking, the context, why are you doing this? I mean, I think all of those steps in that approach to problem solving is useful really in anything you're going to do, just a structured form of thinking and a persistence to kind of follow through on figuring out what this problem is and how do we get to a solution.
And I see that you have a lot of experience in different companies in varied profiles. So, which company did you enjoy the most working with, and what was the reason for that? Culture or
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think, well, throughout my career, starting out where I started at Civics Technologies was very, very close to the kind of area that I had done my PhD in. So, good stepping stone for me because I could really apply what I already understood scientifically to sort of a broader framework. As I then moved to Amyris, I went from like a group of people who had studied very similar things and had very aligned thinking to kind of a bigger, more diverse group of people. So now we had the intersection of chemistry, but also biology and polymer science, as well as more business people. So I think that was a fun experience and just, I think, taught me about the importance of communication and how you kind of layer on communication depending on people's technical or exact expertise. And then moving to Modern Meadow, I think even broader because really now we're taking a bunch of diverse scientific disciplines and then also looking to communicate that all the way into brands that typically deal with consumers. So I think all of those pieces have been fun to see, but I think for me, like layering them on in that way has helped me to understand kind of how to evolve from someone who's very focused on tech and science into someone who can really translate between those two worlds and be able to communicate that to broader audiences and level up just the way that we express what are the opportunities or what is the advantage of this technology or what are we really trying to do here. That's been a fun experience.
yeah. And so there has been a lot of debate on Forbes being scheme and scam due to high startup fee. So, like, what is your take on that, and what role had Forbes Business Development Council played in your business development decisions? Personally?
Yeah, I mean, my take would be, it's nice that they have these kind of organizations, and I think their purpose is really to connect you to a broader set of resources and maybe give you some training. I tend to agree that you have to kind of get a sense of what the real value is. I'm not sure. It depends, right? With something like the Forbes Business Development Council can be useful, can be a good place to network, but also there's a cost to being a part of that. So I think it just depends stage-wise where you are in your career and what your objective is and trying to get out of it. I think it was a little bit helpful, but ultimately not the most informative for me in terms of really forming my point of view on business development and how I made decisions.
Very true. And apart from that, you have also been involved in a few memberships like Activate and Chief memberships. So, like, did they play any role in your divergence to the VC investment side, or?
Well, I think exposure to those broader organizations, again, I think just helped me to frame and understand what my experience and what the things I've been through in my career how I can utilize those to help a range of people, right? Through Activate, I just was able to start working closely with some early stage startups because they fund, basically scientists coming out of a lab who are trying to turn their scientific breakthroughs into businesses. I think having the opportunity to work with those teams helped me to see how my experience can be useful to them, and to just generally hone skills around working closely with them, sort of helping them navigate some of the challenges they were facing through some frameworks that, while I might not understand exactly all the details of their business, I can help them with my experience just in terms of what do you need to do? You need to do some customer discovery. You need to understand this market. What could be a business model that might work? It just sort of helped me hone skills at general, working with a range of different companies and figuring out how to help them get through those early stages of figuring out their strategy and de-risking.
And then in these positions, you generally need to have a upper hand on developments in each industry, along with the CAGR, market requirements, everything. So how do you gauge that when comparing different qualities and the present value? Like, what's your secret sauce behind you know, finding the best form?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty yeah. One thing is for us, we see so many different startups. We invest in about 25 to 30 new companies per year. So we look at, you know, on the order of multiple thousands of companies that we see come through our pipeline, and then really interview a few hundred over the course of a year. I think when you get the opportunity to look at that many and see such a range of different startups, first of all, you kind of have a sense of things that are coming your way a lot. So certain things, you know, we know are kind of interesting because they're new. Other things like, okay, we've seen many like this, and so it's not as interesting. I think that's one lens. The second part is maybe just, you know, for early stage startups, the team really matters, and understanding how this team works. Are they excited about what they're doing? Are they really persistent and they're kind of aggressively pursuing a route to commercialize and have a commercial mindset? Are they really trying to build a business? Are they open to feedback? Are they flexible? Do we think we can work with them to try to really help them shift strategy and improve strategy along the way? So are they open to feedback? Are they agile in the way that they think? And then I think, you know, technology, is it unique? I think you guys were talking earlier about how you really protect technology and have unique IP. You kind of need that in some of these businesses to have a competitive advantage. And then third is just, you know, what's the market and what's the thinking on go to market? Is there truly an unmet need here? What is the competitive landscape? How do we really see that this can have an advantage? I think, you know, because we usually start working with teams at such an early stage, the team really matters. Do we believe in these founders? Are they visionary? Are they going to be able to execute? Are they open to pivoting and being agile to get the job done? That's really an important part of it.
Okay, and like you have been seeing through different areas like startups in healthcare, digital innovation, energy tech, and consumer products, building system, transport, as we have seen. Like, which area do you think is booming right now, and which area is personally you feel exciting, like is exciting for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, like waste to value. I think waste to value in general is going to be a really critical area. It's not an easy one, right? I mean, I think you've seen all the news about how, you know, despite the fact that we recycle plastics, technically, not a lot of recycling actually happens. It's a high energy process. It's a complex sort of like reverse logistics supply chain. I think figuring out some of that waste to value stuff is going to be critical, both on the sort of battery recycling side, on the material recycling side. Lots of people now looking into that in the fashion space and the textiles. But ultimately, it's a complicated problem because you're talking about taking something that's formed, finding a way to get it back to a less formed state, and getting it into a pure enough state to go back into a cycle of production and manufacturing. So I think that's a super interesting area and a challenging one on the business side, and then also really on the technical side. I guess the other really big one is just in general, you know, electrification, decarbonization of manufacturing, how we really shift these systems. I think there's so much going on in the energy sector, and finding, you know, there's lots of different efforts. So how do we really find the right ones? And for us, that will look like multiple bets in different areas, but figuring out, you know, hydrogen transportation, midstream hydrogen, electrification, all of those are pretty interesting, exciting areas.
I think it's a shame that Ian Weiss isn't here. Ian is my co-teacher, but he's out today. He's a material scientist. He's a CEO of a startup called Metcovery. Metcovery is based in Milwaukee. They're focused on recovering heavy metals from solid waste, and they've been doing it for some time. He's got some outstanding opportunities. I think he's on the precipice of what might be a huge boom. And we talked about the shortage of certain types of metals, and you know, I think in a sense, mining will only take us so far. So,
yeah,
recovery and recycling and repurposing are all going to have, I think, a new lease on life in the years ahead.
Yeah, 100%. And I think refining, like you're saying, refining is part of mining in terms of extracting what you need and purifying it, getting it to that state. And refining ultimately can be part of these same recycle streams, right? Refining is kind of the same type of technology you'd use to repurpose something that's a waste stream, taking it back into a value stream.
Exactly. Sorry, Vidita, go ahead.
So I think a few of my friends here are thinking of going over the VC path. They also took the course last quarter for venture capital. What do you think like could be the prerequisites for them to hop into that area?
I think having real world experience is invaluable, and VC is a particular take on the industry, and obviously you need some financial expertise to understand kind of the life cycle of a business and how funding goes and how to think through a cap table and all of that. But I think having real world operational experience can help a lot, because you really do understand some of the challenges. That's where you're really going to learn some of the challenges of a business in terms of building a team and setting culture and figuring out commercialization and thinking through scale up. So I think startup experience is very valuable for those kind of starting out their career. And, whether that's as a founder, which is one angle on it, but really perhaps being on a team within a startup or even a sort of bigger company, I think is a very valuable experience just to kind of help you get the lay of the land. I think understanding the different roles and the different types of responsibilities and how that's divided up and what works and what doesn't, I think that's an incredibly valuable perspective to have, in addition to kind of the academic knowledge, the things you learn about the financial side, as well as the stuff you're learning here around entrepreneurship. I think having operational experience can help a lot.
Sure. And one more thing, like, would you like to share some blogs and podcasts, or like what all do you follow, subscriptions to stay in touch in the industry, in this area and overall in the industry, to keep in touch?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think on the podcast side, one that I've been listening to is called My Climate Journey. And really, I think educational blog to try to help people understand climate tech and how that field is going and how investments are, but also types of companies that are in that space. So yeah, I think also, reading the Wall Street Journal and actually seeing a bit of how they're viewing some of these new technologies has been pretty interesting. They've been publishing things around supply chain, around electrochemistry recently, which is quite interesting. And just seeing how some of these trends start to come into the more mainstream business press has been pretty interesting.
And like we have been seeing your profile overall on LinkedIn and other websites, but it looks very. It seems it was a smooth transition from undergrad research to scientist to further postdoc, and you've just gone through the ladder very smoothly. It looks like that. So what were the challenges overall, and did you take any sort of courses or any sort of mentoring to overcome those? And what is your final advice?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one big learning for me along the way is kind of like you have to take some control over your career if you want to go in a certain direction. I think early on I was an R&D scientist at a company and had got very interested in business, but sort of thought, okay, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and then eventually I'll be working on the business side, or I'll be in management. But it's not exactly how it can work. I think you really need to be a little bit intentional. Map out your career in terms of here are the skills I have, here are the skills I want to build, and how do I progressively build those, whether that's through finding mentors, whether it's through taking a course, or just trying to get roles that are allowing you to have exposure and do some of those things. I think ultimately during my time at Amyris, I was again like a scientist and really became clear, okay, if I want to do more like partner work and work with external customers, I actually have to kind of ask for that role. So it was clear that we were kind of verticalizing one of our products, and the opportunity came up to lead that. But I really had to go and say, hey, I really want to do that. Here's why I think I can do that, but will you give me that opportunity? So asking, I think, for those types of roles, finding mentors and champions that can help you along the way to like educate you, but also really champion your cause and help you navigate through that. Those things are really important. And just, I think, you know, especially now, and it's easier than ever now with LinkedIn and all the resources we have for like social networking and all the, I think there's so much focus now on entrepreneurship and kind of connecting people in different ways. Just take advantage of those and be inquisitive and ask questions and find ways to learn more and see what else you can do if that's of interest to you.
Yeah, so I guess I'm done with my questions. Let's open the session to the audience.
Any questions from the audience, either online or on ground here?
I have one question. Susan, could you walk through us, like in a very brief explanation, that when you receive an application of a company, how do you vet it and how do you finalize that particular company to fund?
To fund it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, our process has a few steps. Initially, people can come to us either through applications, like we have an application on our website, or they can come to us through a referral, like an intro. Initially, we'll just look at the deck and try to understand, you know, is this a technology that seems interesting? Is this a team that we think has potential just on paper? And is this a market that we think and we know kind of has opportunities and unmet needs that we're interested in? So that's really the first screen. I think the next level of screening would be a call with either an analyst on our team or the person who's running our investment process. Those are really the first people to talk to a team to evaluate, you know, do we like this team? Do we think these people have potential? Again, like digging a little deeper into the technology. What is it? How is it protected? How is it unique? You know, and do they have a good sense of where they think they're headed, at least on the business side, and how they're going to commercialize? So that's really the second phase, is that first interview with our analyst or principal on our team to really talk about what they're doing and see if we think this has potential. And then beyond that, really at that point, typically we assign kind of an owner to a team. So whether that's me as a partner with a certain perspective, like some expertise in materials and some of the things I've been talking about, like waste to value chemistry stuff, or if it's more on the robotics side, our partner who is in Shenzhen would really take ownership of that team, or if it's on the healthcare side, our general partner and managing director would take ownership of that, because we kind of have our own different expertise areas. And then continue to do a few interviews with various members of the team. We have an investment team of about 5 people. So typically everyone will have a chance to talk to that team. And then at that point, you know, decide as a team. We usually have a weekly call where we go through these teams that are in our pipeline, get to a decision. We want to work with this team. And an important step for us is really like, how might we work with them? What do we think we can do to accelerate them, and kind of trying to put that on paper so that we can pitch to them the unique reason why they should work with us, as well as just trying to figure out, you know, what's the valuation here and what is the offer terms. Like, we have a pretty narrow window of how we operate in terms of deal structure, because we're so early stage. Valuations, you know, it's hard to really calibrate those to a broader spectrum, but we do have our own calibration. So really just figuring out what the deal terms look like, pitching that to the team, hopefully selling them on the fact that we're a pretty unique partner. And so, you know, the way that we will invest, which includes cash investment plus in-kind investment for some equity, is going to be a fit for them and can really accelerate them. And then just trying to close that deal through, you know, legal paperwork and all that.
So I've got a few questions. I guess my first one is, what should a entrepreneur look for in an investor? I'm going to flip it around, the normal model, I guess, right?
Yeah. Look, I mean, an investor is a partner. Investors, of course, provide you access to capital, but I think you need to be choosy. You need to really understand what you can get from this investor. Of course, it depends on your business and what you think you need and the gaps, but is it someone who's going to be there to mentor you, to help you? Is it someone who's going to have unique relationships? So if you're going into again, like waste to value, is there a partner like closed loop venture partners, right? They have a bunch of different stages of funds. They have unique relationships with a lot of recycling and kind of CPG companies. So is it relationships like that you can really get from them, that they can connect you to and kind of put you into a different space to be able to have those relationships and that traction? Or is it what we can do? We offer hands-on help, which is, again, so unique because not many people really do what we do. I think you really need to understand what this VC can offer you and what you think of them as a partner. Is it someone you trust? I mean, keeping in mind that the best they'll probably ever treat you is kind of in that initial courting stage. So if things don't feel right at that point, I think it's a sign, it's a red flag that something might not be right. So who's a partner that you think you can work with? Who's a partner that you trust? And who's a partner that ultimately can bring you some value that hopefully is unique? I mean, access to capital is key, but what else can they really do for you to help you accelerate your business? Do they have expertise in the area that you're in? Do they have unique connections? All of that.
Some of the best students that I've had in entrepreneurship are foreign nationals that probably in many cases want to stay in the US and start their business. Are those two things mutually exclusive?
Probably not. You mean, as your question really, can they start a business here if they don't have, let's say, the proper documentation to be fully?
Well, if they're here on an F1 student visa, then they have a certain amount of time where they can, work beyond their degree as part of OPT, and then they have to file for H-1B, which is the standard process, which requires companies to sponsor them. I guess I'm wondering, is there another process that foreign students can follow that would allow them to be entrepreneurs? I mean, it seems ridiculous that we have such great talent and we're letting it slip through our fingers.
I think that's a great question. I don't think I have a full answer to that one. But it's a really great point. And I think, it goes probably above and beyond some of the things that we look to address. I don't exactly know the answer on what the process is there, but yeah, I mean, it would be unfortunate to lose that talent, but also to lose that innovation being here in the US if we can't secure those companies, not just those people, but them to start the companies that they're starting here.
Well, more and more I'm hearing from students that they're willing to go back to their home country to do their business as opposed to staying here if this country can't figure out how to keep them. So maybe you and I and people like us can team up and go to Washington and maybe open some eyes and say, look, this isn't right. I mean, we want innovation. We need innovation. We want to grow our job base. We want to grow our industrial base, and we're letting it slip through our fingers. It's right in front of us, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's a big problem, I think, as you're saying. I don't have an answer, but I absolutely will say that, we're doing more and more to kind of team up with others to do some more lobbying on topics like this one, things like how to get IRA funding allocated to some of this innovation, but certainly having the talent, making sure that talent stays here and that we can actually have that innovation here in the US is super important.
Yep. Any other questions for Susan over there? Vidita. You just had a bunch of questions.
So I had a follow-up question to Professor's initial question. So this is regarding the thing that if you see in the Bay Area, there are a lot of startups popping up. Startup is a booming industry over there, and there are a lot of incubation labs and VC investors also. So how do you showcase yourself? What are your modes? Or you can say like what is your value proposition in that case in front of all other investor companies?
Yeah. How do you distinguish yourself from the other incubators and accelerators that are in the market, of which there are lots of those as well, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we've been talking about a lot over the past year since I've joined this group. I think, first of all, is just kind of getting our name out there a bit more. Like I feel like SOSV has some recognition, name recognition. IndieBio is pretty well known, I think, but HAX is kind of in a more obscure place. So it's just about partly getting our name out there, simplifying the story of what we do, and trying to communicate that clearly in terms of how unique it is, but how that works, and whether that's through like showcasing some of our portfolio companies and what they've been able to do, or having more press, or improving our website. I think ultimately, the other way that we do that is through embedding some fellows, like HAX fellows, into universities, because ultimately that's how we really scout for the next best companies, is having them out there, talking to different research groups, understanding the lay of the land, trying to help us see some of that deal flow at an earlier stage. But absolutely, I think we need to define what our core competitive advantage is, and get the word out there to those that are in this space, with what we do, being real hard tech innovators, trying to make sure that they know who we are and see us kind of as a first option when they go to commercialize a business. But yeah, I think we're doing a lot on that, just to have a presence on LinkedIn, have a presence on Twitter, get some thought leadership around some of this stuff, as well as just communicate what we uniquely can do, and get those case studies out there and get those so that people see that and want to work with us.
Well, towards that end, let me build on that and just say, in exchange for this great talk you gave tonight, I'm willing to help you in terms of offering you a seat on our advisory board. You can always join us every winter quarter as we teach Nuvention.
Awesome.
We'd love to have you, or one of your colleagues. This video, with your permission, I'd love to just share on our YouTube channel, which will probably get a good amount of visibility as well.
Awesome.
And of course, every year, you or your colleagues are invited to give a similar presentation to share the word about what you guys are working on. And if you have key events coming up, maybe an intake or maybe some sort of a competition, just let us know about it, and we'll spread the word. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we'd be happy to do that. We actually do have a fellow that's at Northwestern, Stephanie Zelenitz. I can share her name with you guys. She's, I think, in the biomed department. But yeah, I can also maybe connect her to you guys, because she's our scout on the ground there. But yeah, we'd love to do that. I think, super exciting. And I think Northwestern has done a great job of trying to help support on entrepreneurs commercializing all the great science and engineering that's going on there, as well as other things. So that would be awesome.
I think you'll find with Ison's help that we are punching well above our weight class when it comes to the energy space, the clean tech space, and the intersection with entrepreneurship. I see a question from Noy. I think Noy's been very patient, so I'll let Noy go ahead.
Yeah, this is Zach. Hi. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. So I'm one of the MBA candidates from CalEd in the class, and I'm interning right now at one of the accelerator programs out there. And you're investing in companies that have very long product development time, healthcare, climate tech, what we're trying to do here. And I was curious to hear from you, what do you think are the biggest challenges for early stage startups in this long development time period, and how do you think is the best way to overcome these challenges? And especially, how do you think the program makes the difference for them?
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, it's very hard when you're working on something that's in hard tech and industrial, climate tech, healthcare, all are long product development cycles. I think the key is really, ideally, if you're doing something that has a lot of technology in it, that technology is coming out of a research group. And so there's been that opportunity to kind of work on it and get it to a certain proof of concept point in a lab before it's really spun out into a company. I think that helps a lot because that starts you off sort of, you're able to hit the ground running and know what that tech looks like. And hopefully some IP, you've got some IP filed and all of that. I think the second thing is really starting to understand what are the market opportunities and then what's the right beachhead market. Obviously, there's always a trade-off there in terms of like, figuring out what could be the most feasible thing, figuring out what's something very attractive market-wise. I would not say you have to start with the most attractive thing or the biggest market. You have to start with something solid that really gives you enough traction that proves that you have something and can get out there to commercialization. So I think going after revenue quickly, going after beachhead markets is super important. And also articulating what that really proves about what this business has done and how you've de-risked it is also important. I think beyond the very early stage, which we really help to catalyze and accelerate through the work that we do, and I think that's important because not a lot of investors maybe like to take on that level of tech risk or just very early stage. It's hard for them to kind of understand. So we can help catalyze that because we're very technical and operational in that way. And so we can identify companies and we can present those to the broader investor community to really make those connections and bridge that gap. That's where we're unique. I think the second piece is as these companies get to the Series A, Series B stage, scaling, growing, really getting traction, I'd say beyond initial like market entry is a very difficult problem. So I think there's a need for there to be good patient capital through that stage. There's a need for those that are in the industry, like the corporate partners out there that are looking for innovation to find creative ways to actually adopt the innovation that exists. Because I think we have a need and we have solutions, but bridging between those two is often very hard. And yeah, I think those are things that we look to address. I think we're a little bit less focused on that growth stage, but it's something I've seen a lot of in my career and think is a really important challenge for companies. But I think that's going to be the thing in this Clean Tech 2.0 is just how do we really get an understanding of what it takes to get a company like these companies solving these tough problems off the ground. It's going to take time. It's going to take capital, going to take patient investors, and it's going to take a committed world of the incumbents and the corporates to really find ways to adopt innovation and help be a part of that solution.
Thank you.
The case study for that, that's a great question, Noy. I think a lot of investors shy away from this space because they're not quite as patient as they need to be. LanzaTech is a great case study. Lanza's in our neighborhood here. It's in Skokie. I think they're changing their name to LanzaJet, if I'm not mistaken. A SynBio-based startup that's got their own massive bioreactor, and they've got bioreactors in other parts of the world that are all trying to synthesize different types of value-added product. And one of them is jet fuel. And I think that's why they're changing their name to LanzaJet. But for more than a decade, they were pursuing lots of opportunities, but nothing to completion or nothing to fruition. And I think what they've done in the last couple of years is narrow down that this is their beachhead, and their beachhead, I believe, is going to be jet fuel, because frankly, it's going to be very difficult to electrify jets as we know them. And unless we redesign the idea of what a jet is, or somehow make some breakthroughs on battery storage or some other, maybe some sort of fuel cell for aviation, we're looking at 20 or 30 years of liquid fuels for jets, and they want to step into that space. So, but again, it's been well more than a decade. I want to say closer to a decade and a half.
I think it's since, what, 2005?
Yes. Oh, technically that's 18 years then, right?
Yeah, actually,
Wow.
their CEO just was one of the keynotes at Calais Climate Conference yesterday. So he basically spoke about this, about the last 20 years or so since they started and how they pivoted over time and their challenges.
Yeah. Actually, one of my colleagues who's also just joined our team was one of the earlier LanzaTech employees, and he really helped scale and build their first commercial plant. So it's a pretty interesting case study for sure. I guess they're just going through this SPAC, which is, an outcome, but maybe not the best one. But it's a very challenging field and hard to get really through that difficult part of scaling and getting product to market, especially in those types of industries.
And how do you find an investor that's willing to wait 18 years to see some sort of return? Khosla, Vinod Khosla has a vision himself, so it's more than just a VC. This is almost like an angel, something between an angel and a VC. I think they have that kind of patience, that kind of vision. So you talk about choosing your partner, you have to choose them wisely because this is certainly a long gestation process here. And not every VC is ready for this, right? Any other questions? Otherwise, Susan, I want to thank you. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much.
It's now 7:50. Why don't we come back in 15 minutes, 8:05, and then we'll pick up with basically the Valley of Death discussion, which will include the technology readiness levels discussion, which I don't think we've had quite yet, but I think it's important to include in this class. And then I'll try to turn it over to team time so you guys can get your pitches together for the final 2 weeks of class. So see you in 15.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to meet you.
And we're gonna share this recording if that's okay with you on our channel. No problem.
Yep. Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Okay. Take care.
It is, yeah, I did like 90% of it. Now I don't have it saved on my hard drive. And I don't know how to do it, but I call in. We use the remote login. I don't know how to get it on the. Yeah. I did. Yeah. I like saved the network. Yeah.
I took note of help.
Divided by 10.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I think it was a little freezing. I get it. Like that's a super, like I bet it was a whole thing. I was like, they changed the class yesterday.
I mean, this is your last.
Oh, no, so it's, I mean,
So that would be. So you have four classes, four more classes. That's three more, right? Yeah, three more quarters. So that by the time next year, this time out.
and also like work is at.
Yeah. During this course, I attended three conferences. One company is in Chicago area. That's very I started Facebook. Yeah, I work remote. Yes, company one team. Yeah. Yeah. So I start working with I send work for them. Yeah.
Which one? Nuvention or the
Yeah.
like my the same one. So we use I actually maybe they sheets are working with
Yeah, they have a unique job.
Yeah, no, it is a big, but I really want to experience of. Yeah. So you want the different one. So 2 days of like, you have so much work. And talking to those cases. Pure remote. Hard to see people. That makes social work.
Texas.
so you're
Yeah.
Not you, just honestly, I think that we just wait for the time. Let's stick on most guys. Like, I just want to comment on our presentation.
Fly tomorrow. Not really. My eyes. Yeah. Right now, already 4.5 years old. Starting to the culture, even in the office, we see a lot of humans use student F1 students. So they are. So I left it. I mean, no, yeah.
He is coming there.
I'm the only one. I know, I think that's
Well, everyone works there.
Yeah. There's like I have a colleague from.
I have
Yeah, like
Power. Yeah. Power anything. It's just to make your building LEED certified, decarbonized. I'm gonna look at this one. I'll show you real quick.
Most of us are back. Should we get started? What do you think? Let's get started. You waiting on anyone?
I mean, for the leader. At that point, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we get together? Because I'm thinking we could probably wind this up a little bit early tonight.
Yeah, get to rate that. I'll get to rate that now. Another remote. It's another remote. Red Zuma product management.
You found it?
Yeah, it's just, I thought it was done and there's so much more.
So much more.
Yeah. The part B is a whole nother project.
Well, it's, I think you have to just take the original plan and modify it for resources, right? So I think, you know, obviously don't throw away your old file, just build on what you got and make some changes. It's not gonna be a stuff.
I fly out tomorrow morning to Colorado, so I can't.
Do it on the plane.
I can't access Microsoft Project unless I'm on Northwestern's Wi-Fi.
Okay. For the VPN, take a VPN in.
Right now, the global network or something.
Yes, definitely get the VPN software before you take off, because you're gonna need it on the other side. Okay, guys, let's get started. I see it's 8:05. What I wanted to cover were two things tonight, right? One is the valley of death, and the other one is TRLs. Let's start with TRLs. Has anyone heard of NASA's technology readiness levels, TRL? No? It's a way of assessing the maturity of a technology. And you could ask, well, who even cares? Why would you want to do that? Well, we want to be able to normalize our discussions, right? When we're talking about a technology, it would be good to know, are we talking about something that actually has a proof of concept versus something that's already in manufacturing and production, or something in between? So NASA decided to make these slices so that they could normalize discussions and actually have, you know, if you will, apples to apples comparisons, right? So you don't want to compare proof of concept, right, you know, right in the laboratory versus something that's ready to go into full-scale manufacturing on the same basis, right? Some things to note as you go from left to right. It is clear that you are de-risking your product or your technology. What that means financially is the valuation increases as you go from left to right, okay? Two ways to look at that, right? The value in the marketplace is going up, but the risk value is going down, okay? By de-risking it, there are people and organizations and companies that all they do is move a technology from one column to the next, or from one column to 2 or 3 columns down, okay? And then they're hands off and they say, we're done. Let's go back and do it again with some other technology, okay? In the drug discovery business, that's especially true, but in other industries as well. I like to use drugs as a drug discovery as kind of a parallel because of the long gestation period, the high risk factors, right? The technology risk that goes with it, that's incumbent about going through various levels of you know, safety testing, et cetera, right? Clinical testing. There's a lot of parallels between drug development and energy. In fact, there's papers that have been written about the parallels, and a lot of it is from an investor perspective. So when you look at this from the investor perspective, right? At the bottom, you look at where the sources of funding are. And remember, this whole paper was very much DOE and energy focused, right? So if you step back, some of these may not make sense. Like, for example, university or government funding isn't available for everybody. But what might be? Personal funds. Most entrepreneurs tap into their personal funds first, okay? Then they do friends and family. In fact, they literally call it the friends and family round, okay? People you know who you trust and who trust you, right? You're going into that trusted network and you're saying, would you like to invest in my startup, okay? Beyond that, what's missing here, I think, is angels. And I use the word angel with Susan and she looked a little shocked, so I'm going to use it with you guys. It's not that shocking, okay? I mean, I'm sorry, but there's angel networks in every industry. Find the angel network that works for you in your industry. If you're still with energy, find angel networks that focus on energy. And I truly believe Khosla Ventures, you know, investing for 18 years in Tech is acting more like an angel than they are acting like VC, because most VCs have 10-year term limits on their funds, okay? And they're very strict about it, to the point where they exit after 10 years, good or bad. It's done. That fund is shut down. It's structured that way. It's written into the contracts, okay? But an angel is often acting independently of some venture company or some venture fund, is often using their own personal funds. Angels have a vested interest in some industry or another, sometimes energy, sometimes medical. Maybe it's the industry they grew up in, they're retired, they want to give back. This is literally a way of giving back. I know angels that are attached to the university that literally only give to student startups, okay? So if you ever want to tap into them, let me know. I can make an introduction, but I'll let you know that they have kind of a medical bias because that's where they grew up. So medical devices, medical informatics, things like that. So those are the things that are kind of missing from this chart. But in addition to university or government funding, I mean, we have to be kind of specific about that, right? There's funding right here for ISIN, from ISIN to your startup. If you have a great idea that's related to clean tech that they think is valuable, that they have the funds to support, I've seen not huge quantities, but maybe 5 or 10,000 come from ISIN. But more importantly, they can give you space. Not give you space, but they'll find a way to carve out some space for some short period of time. And it might be a wet lab, it might be a laboratory of some sort that you can get access to while you're still here on campus, right? So I don't know, did you want to mention anything else or go into more detail next week or?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to anybody that's interested generally in specifics, but broadly speaking, our goal is to support ecosystems at the university that are working on climate and sustainability issues. Sometimes those companies or early stage ventures need really unique services that are expensive or hard to find, and similar to non-dilutive capital, which I know that we talked about in the class, get all the free resources that you can when you can get them. So sometimes that's help with networking, sometimes that's access to specialized equipment, sometimes that's a couple $1,000s to run a feasibility study. We have helped student teams out of this class in the past. Anybody that was at the Kellogg conference yesterday may have seen one of the startups talking. Her name was Soumya. She was an MBA candidate that helps run agricultural services for smallholder farmers in India. She was one of the first startups actually that we helped support out of some of our programs, and is still doing that work 5 or 6 years later. We've helped a bunch of companies that have come out of this class with small and some larger grants as well. So feel free to find me, chat with me if that might be helpful. I can't promise you that we always have access to the resource or a level of funding that you need, but please consider us an open ear and a willing partner to help.
We've used Vazatech as a case study. Another case study might be Nanogram, right? So Synode is their previous name. Samir Mayakar was one of their founders, Kellogg student. I can't say that, I can't take credit for this course per se. I don't think he was a Nuvention Energy alum, but he was an alum of the early part of these other initiatives, as I understand.
I know it was came out of this class.
Came out of this class, it was before I taught it then. It was during Mike Marasco was right there.
Probably. But
it was definitely supported by ISIN at some point. And I always would make fun of Samir because for 4 or 5 years, he was on the circuit of winning competitions and going around and competing literally for 4 or 5 years. And I kept asking him, are you ever going to become an operational company or are you simply a company that goes and wins competitions, right? And what I guess I didn't realize even then was just how long this gestation period is and how important non-dilutive capital is. He understood it and he milked it for all it was worth, right? And I would encourage you to do the same in a very patient way. If this is your industry, if this is your startup, take it on the road, get a, Rice Businessman. Who's looking at Rice Businessman competition? Anyone? Okay, we got a couple, right? Our teams have done very well there. You'd be surprised. I mean, it's largely having the right idea at the right time with the right packaging and the right homework and the right delivery. And
I feel like I've done very well there undersells that we've had multiple teams win the entire competition.
Okay, there you go. And the one that I guess I'm reminded of is New Mix Materials that went out there. They didn't win the competition, but they won the DOE prize. And you can say, well, what was that? It was like over $50,000. But guess what? It didn't stop there. It opened the door to be competing with other DOE prizes around the country, okay? They were invited to national competitions from the regional. And from there, it opened the door for where they are today, right? Which is at Argonne National Lab, CRI, right? And in CRI, they have effectively an incubator, an accelerator, funding for up to $3 million, access to the lab for 2 or 3 years. They get badges that bring them into the building and they can do their research and development right there in a world-class energy laboratory, okay? So this is where it can take you. So I encourage you to go for it. I mean, I know probably people think we're not ready. It's not cooked. It's not perfect. First of all, you're never going to be ready. It's never really going to be fully cooked. And, it's never really going to be perfect, but it doesn't have to be. What they're looking for are the right ideas with the right teams around the right technologies, okay? And with people who understand the business aspects and are pursuing it. I've been a CRI judge. Maybe off the record, I can say that every Nuvention energy class I've had has had better understanding of the linkage to business than CRI teams, okay? That get so focused on technology that they lose sight of the business and the market and the applications, right? They get very focused on how this technology works or doesn't work and what they're doing to enhance it. You guys are going to go hopefully beyond that. So don't ever feel like you're not worthy. You are worthy. You can compete. You can succeed. Back to TRLs, right? So from 1 to 10, where you can basically look at 1 through 3 are the invention stage. 4 through 6 is the application stage. 7 and 8 is the demonstration stage. 9 and 10 is the deployment stage, right? So this is effectively, if you want to call it 0 to 1, maybe this is the 0 to 1 threshold, right? And this is the 1 to many threshold. And I guess Susan kept saying how difficult 0 to 1 was. As hard as that is, 1 to many is much, much harder. Where Elon Musk lost most of his sleep was not 0 to 1, it was 1 to many, okay? And getting that 1 to many means you have a manufacturing system with yields that are acceptable, so that the quality level is there, you're consistently building product. Each product is like the one before, not handcrafted, not modified or repaired in some sort of repair shop, but literally through the process is consistently hitting high quality marks, high production marks. And when you build it, you actually make money instead of lose money. There are EV companies to this day in this country, outside of Tesla, that are struggling with that and have not been able to achieve that. And they've been at it for half a dozen years. And I think Rivian's among them. Rivian's based here in the state of Illinois. They can make product, they can't make money in making product. So you've got problem identified, technology concept formulated, proof of concept, right? This is a very classic question you will get from investors. Are you beyond proof of concept? Are you in the application stage, right? You have an alpha, a beta at the component level and at the system level, right? You have an integrated system that you can say actually works. And this is where I spent most of my career, I guess, right around in here at Motorola in the early days, and then ramping production over here, okay? The TRL level you're at will define what types of investors, what kinds of money you're going to need, what levels of investment, right? From Series A in the application stage, A, B, and second tranche, Series C, mezzanine, IPO, initial public offering, and then project financing. This is where basically the business is funding itself and the revenues are funding the business. Questions about TRLs? I don't want you to be stumped when an investor says, what TRL level are you at? And don't be surprised if some investors never ask because they don't even know what a TRL is. It's a strange kind of industry specific nomenclature. It doesn't apply to every industry.
Two questions. What is this?
Mezzanine?
And then, another question is, for this TRL 1 to 10, is there a relationship or mapping to Motorola gates?
Is there like the matching to the stage gates?
No, Motorola M gates.
Yeah, M gates are stage gates.
Yeah.
They're the same thing. By the way, I helped them invent the M gates for Motorola.
Oh, that's cool.
They didn't give me a thumbs up.
Thank you.
You give me a thumbs up. Thank you. 20 years later, I'll take a bow, but guess what? They were chasing me out the door for creating M gates. So M gates and stage gates are synonymous. Really, we ripped it off from companies like Lucent Technologies that had very well-established gates. Yes, there are some parallels. However, I would say that the stage gate process starts more or less over here. So in essence, in TRL 7 and beyond, right? So even the best stage gate process assumes you have like a working integrated system. What you're trying to do is figure out how to bring it to market. We were able to slice, this is why they almost shot me, okay? I sliced those 3 or 4 TRL levels into 18 gates. And the salespeople, as pure politicians as they are, they said, well, no wonder you're so late all the time. You got too many stages. So my boss says, you got too many gates. I said, okay, fine. I scrunched them into 5 gates, and then they saluted me, right? So these 3 or 4 TRL levels can be stretched into 5 gates or 18 gates, however maniacal you want to be. all it means is that you're managing the transition from one stage of development to the next, right? You have criteria, exit and entrance criteria. You've got people who are assigned to achieving those things. You have people assigned to assessing those things and checking them off and making sure they're correct. The system test started, right? This field test started. Have you met the field test criteria, right? Later in my career, we actually got so good at hitting these quality gates that we were able to skip some because we were hitting the next gate's criteria at this gate, right? So we were able to leapfrog, right? Reducing the schedule, increasing, I guess, increasing our speed to market, or fast time to market. What else can I say about TRLs? I mean, this is a nomenclature that you should try to become comfortable with. And when people ask you where are you at in your process, you need to use both TRL language and language that people understand. Okay, you asked what mezzanine was, right? Mezzanine bridges the Series C and where you run out, okay, with the IPO, which is the initial public offering. So this is literally when you go into the public markets for the first time and you're offering your stock, okay? This is arguably the goal of most startups is an IPO, right? When your Series C runs out and to bridge you to the IPO, they often create this mezzanine structure, which is another form of financing. Yeah, there's a question.
I don't know, like as venture capitalists, what is the incentive of doing the Series A funding to any startup versus, let us say, a Series C, where the risk is less, the valuation is high for a startup? What incentivizes venture capitalists to, to jump in early in the
It
startup?
depends on the structure of the deal. So if you've got founder shares, maybe the founder shares are over here, right? And the common shares are over here. Founder shares have a different priority. So in liquidation, the founder shares get paid out first before the common shares. Whenever you invest in the stock market, I assure you, you are getting common shares. I invest in startups. And in fact, this is the irony. I just got a notification today that I have a second chance to invest in a startup that I invested in 18 months ago. I got founder shares 18 months ago. They're not offering that to me at that. All right. And oh, by the way, the stock price went up 3x. I went to my wife and I said, I'm not so sure about this anymore. At the old price, it made sense. When it was founder shares, it made sense. But now, 18 months later, I guess these guys have grown up and they're not treating me so well. So maybe I'll just sit on my money and wait for the next deal. Right? But the founder shares have different amounts of control as well as liquidation preferences. Other than that, what's the advantage here? I mean, think about how much de-risking has happened between here and here, okay? So it depends on where you are as an investor on the risk profile. I mean, if you're risk averse, you'll be over here, right? If you want to get the maximum gain and you're not too worried about risk, you're going to be over here, right? But prior to this, the real question is, it's like, how do you survive the entire episode here? How do you survive from TRL 1 to TRL 10? The entire journey, right? You're going to have highs and lows. And I put together this quick little valley of death here. We use the word runway, and I'm assuming you guys know what I mean by runway. It's simply understanding how fast you're spending money, right, which is your burn rate, divided by how much cash you have, right? So if you are spending $1 million a month and you get 50 million in the bank, in 4 years you're done, right? 4-year runway, $1 million a month. You have lots of knobs to twist as an entrepreneur. One thing you can do is reduce your burn rate. Lower your costs, maybe find cheaper rent somewhere, maybe work from home. It's funny how work from home has been the preferred solution 2 years ago, and now suddenly everyone has to come back to the office. Doesn't that increase your burn rate if you're a startup? And the answer is yes, clearly. If you're paying rent, you're going to have to, that's part of your monthly nut, right? Bottom line, the shorter the runway, the higher the burn rate. I mean, if I had to prioritize, I would say this is the danger zone, okay? This is where you as an entrepreneur are potentially running out of cash. And you have to either lower your burn rate or increase somehow your cash on hand, right? Get more investors. And here's the problem. How do you get more investors when you are in trouble? Why would somebody, here's the better part, why would they invest if you're a company that's in trouble, right? You're running out of cash. Most of the time, why people invest, they're taking the business to the next level, okay? Not just technological sophistication, right? But they're also investing in ramping the capacity of the organization to produce product, to deliver product, right? To run a business. So at some point, they might need to hire a CFO. They might need to hire a legal team. They might need to hire a marketing team. They might need to hire product managers and project managers, right? These are step functions in the development of your business. Each one raises the ante. Each one increases your burn rate. Each one exposes your company to potentially running out of cash if you're not careful, right? So it's carefully managing cash flow in and out. The entrepreneur does this innately, right? So the business I invested in was game development. It's a studio. They produce games. They don't produce the framework for the games. They don't produce the hardware for the games. They produce the content. So it's math, it's art, it's music, fully integrated in some kind of game design, okay? That is usually some kind of entertainment as well, right? So it's an integrated theme, if you will. Think of it as a movie that has to be played at movie houses or has to be played on cable television or in television, distribution. The problem with this, of course, is that it has its highs and lows, right? I mean, you release it, it gets popular for a while, it plays, and then it dies out. 24 months, maybe from start to finish. But that's in one channel. So you have to manage the channels and the distribution, right? Europe, US, online, on ground, West Coast, East Coast. There's probably 100+ jurisdictions just inside this country alone. And within that, you've got 3 or 4 gaming types in the gambling house, right? So, type 1, type 2, type 3. So that's the playground you're playing in. And when you negotiate with somebody who's distributing your game, they can pay you up front, or they could pay you a residual as the game plays out. Why would you want to be paid up front? You're an entrepreneur. Cash is king. Cash in my pocket today is better than cash in my pocket tomorrow. What if I told you I'll give you $5 today, but you could earn $20 in the next 3 years? What do you do now?
I would take $5.
You take the $5. Because you're worried about cash today. What if you have money in the bank? Give me the 20 over 3 years, right? Yeah, right. Your answer changes depending on where you are in that curve. You want to participate in the upside, meaning, more than just the $5 that it costs to develop. You want to do more than just cover your costs. You want to make a profit. You want to grow your business. You want to pay back your investors. You want to invest in the next generation of product, right? You're smiling there.
I think I can relate to how the movie stars charge their fee nowadays.
Yeah.
They don't charge one-time payment, right?
They want
They
to
charge percentage of profit.
They want the back end, right?
So
And this
I
is
think
how we
that's
talk
fair.
about it. We talk about the front end or the back end. Yeah. Do you want a percentage of the back end or do you want it all up front? And when
So yeah, so I think eventually they realize that the percentage of profit is way more than what they can get it. Like, of course, they can increase their prices, per movie, but still they are more interested in nowadays. Of course, the popular ones, they're more interested in the percentage of the profit versus.
Sure, especially if you're already well-to-do, as many of our movie stars are well-to-do. They've got cash in the bank. They don't have to pay tomorrow's bills. They got tomorrow's bills covered, okay? So they're looking at what's the upside for me? Why should I even waste my time? And the other side has the flip side concern. It's just like, well, wait a minute here. If I share my upside with you, where's the upside for me, right? And also, it's just like, I'd rather pay you up front, and then I can take care of all the back end, and I can rake in all of the back end profits, right? But then there's also incentive too. It's just like, if I pay you up front, then you're being paid independent of the performance.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're not incentivized to make a good game.
There's a skin in the game.
Right, so you need skin in the game, so I want you to have a piece of the back end, even if I'm buying it from you, right? But not too big a piece, because I want the majority of the back end, right? Are you a contract house? Are you speculating on the quality of your game so that you can see residuals at the end? As a CEO, you're answering these questions all the time, right? What is your business about? What is the vision of your business, right? And what you do at the beginning to pay the bills may not be what you do at the end once your bills are covered, okay? So TRLs are a way of normalizing the discussion. It's a way of mapping to your financing. It's a way of understanding how risk gets mitigated over time. You're buying down the risk, and you're putting money in. So the game is you're putting more money in. Sorry, you're putting less money in than what the risk valuation reduction is, right? So I'm putting in $1 million, but I'm getting $10 million in risk reduction, right? The valuation of your product has to go up more than the money you put in. Otherwise, you're wasting your money. Or otherwise, you shouldn't even be in business. It's like burning a pile of cash, right? And those students in MEM, hopefully they know how to value. And if you don't, you'll take the finance class and learn how to value products and technologies over time. So let's move quickly then to the money chart, which is this chart here, right? And of course, this case study is all about clean tech and about energy, but I think this applies beyond that. So you're looking at the investment curve over time, the R&D phase, the commercialization phase, and the adoption phase. Adoption is when the market starts buying your product en masse, and they're buying it in quantities in bulk, right? There's a funding gap that basically exists between really when you're starting to invest in hardware development, right? And the more hardware you need, the more expensive it becomes. And this is the source of this valley of death. This is the source of this gap. You're waiting for the big returns when you hit the marketplace, right? But you're spending the money up front. I teach a case called Boeing 767 for my project management students. They know it well, or they should. And we spent, as I recall, billions of dollars in tooling for the 767 before the first plane shipped. When do you get paid? After the plane ships. And oh, by the way, in the case study is a delay in the first 30, 40 planes going out the door. The company that's starving for cash doesn't want to see any delays at all, right? But it's all about investing in tooling and fixturing. What I don't think we talked about is how Boeing progressively dealt with this, right? So suppliers to Boeing in the 787 case versus 767 wound up having suppliers to invest in their own tooling. It's not theirs, it's property of Boeing. So if I'm building a fixture that's needed to produce a part for Boeing's aircraft, right? Boeing is telling me to invest in that piece of tooling and then stamp a Boeing asset number at the bottom of it when I'm done. Why would I do that? Do you want the business or don't you? We're Boeing. Where are you going to go? I can go to Airbus. No, I don't think so. You're in the US, Airbus likes to do business in Europe. I don't think so. And if you want to go to them, go ahead. Right? But guess what? They're doing the same thing. So how do I recoup it? In my unit cost. Okay, so if I'm charging you by the piece part X amount, it's going to be X plus Y, because I'm amortizing the tool over a period of, let's say, 700 chipsets or 1,000 chipsets. So I'm taking 1,000th of that tool and putting it into the piece part. I may not recover that money for 6 years. That's called vendor financing, okay? Where does it come from? It comes from the startup mentality. But we got companies like Boeing doing it. Well, Boeing has cash flow issues just like everybody else. Other forms of non-traditional financing? How about customer financing, right? They pay you up front. They pay you in incremental stages. They pay you down payments for work that hasn't even been done yet, right? So your expenses haven't been incurred, but your money's in the bank, right? So vendor financing, customer financing, there's all sorts of creative ways for you as the entrepreneur to manage cash. Why? Because the value of debt is called value of debt for a reason. This is where companies are most vulnerable. Did I miss any kind of financing that maybe our Kellogg students or other students might have noticed that I missed? Is there anything I should have talked about? We probably talked about SBIR, STTR, right? Joint development agreements, JDAs. This is exactly how LanzaTech got through the last 18 years, okay? They have a bioreactor that's very valuable. They can lease time on the bioreactor. People will spend money to get access to a bioreactor of that quality and that scale. They have engineers and scientists. They can do projects for people on a per project basis, joint development agreements. As long as they don't conflict with the objective of the company, why not, right? As long as you have the capacity, as long as it doesn't detract from your overall goals, it's a way of bringing money in when your money's starved, okay? So JDAs, leasing part of your equipment, all sorts of, vendor financing, customer financing. Any other ideas? Once you're an entrepreneur, you'll be calling me up, right? Trust me, there's more ideas than we could possibly think of. Probably every company has their own approach to this. Getting contractors and suppliers to pay for their own tooling is genius, but also wicked. Because every supplier is saying to themselves, God, is it expensive to do business with Boeing, right? But I want to do business with Boeing. Do your suppliers want to do business with you? Who's got the deeper pockets? Are they going to willingly finance you, right? How about a law firm? Lawyers can be one of your most expensive operational. How do you get past law firms, right? You need the patents, you need the corporation, paperwork, you need a lot of things from lawyers. They're going to charge you 6 figures before you can blink an eye, right? Will they take deferred payments? Will they take equity? Meaning a piece of your business in exchange for the work. Could you go through the Northwestern Legal Department, Legal Center for students, right? Will they help you set these things up? The answer in your case is yes. The Northwestern Law School has a legal clinic for students. They'll help you set up corporations. They'll help you set up, patents and copyrights at a very small nominal cost, fractions of what you normally pay. What's the downside? You have to stand in line. There's other students doing the same thing, and there's a narrow door. So you're not all going to get it at once. Plan ahead. Guess what? They're not always here in the summer. They're like gone, so you have to wait until they come back. They're on semesters, so they come back in August. You come back in September. But I mean, there's easily 2 or 3 months in the summer where you're not going to get anything done. Okay, so plan ahead. The government is there to help sometimes, right? So small business administration loans and grants, and also services that they provide. So there's a lot of avenues for you to bridge this valley of death, right? Other comments or questions? So you see the layering here, right? You got the capital required. You've got the government money here in the beginning stages. By the way, this is non-dilutive. They're not taking equity. These are grants. There's a big discussion in Washington. I mean, some of the biggest companies that we know of have been funded by government grants, and yet the government sees nothing except maybe income tax later, sales tax, whatever. I mean, they're not seeing any kind of recoupment of their investment, right? Venture capital here, right? So the blue stripes, corporate funding, right? By the way, that's another, joint ventures with companies. So how did Tesla get funded in the early stages? Do you know that Toyota invested in Tesla?
Volkswagen.
Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Mercedes. What did they get in exchange? They actually got some batteries, and those batteries were put into vehicles that were compliance vehicles, right? Here's the killer thing, right? I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, Toyota said, this Tesla thing isn't going anywhere, so we're going to dump our stock. So they dumped their stock before they really saw any decent return on it, right? So they were smart enough to get involved early, not so smart to not stay with them, right? Dump them early on. And now they're fighting EVs tooth and nail. So corporate money is there, right? Sometimes corporations that might seem like enemies can early on be friends, right? Or at least pretend to. Sometimes they're investing in you because they want to take you over, or they're flirting with the idea of taking you over. And you have to ask yourself, is this the path you want your company to be on, right? Does Tesla want to be an acquisition of Toyota Motor Company, right? I'm sure the answer was no. They found a way to eventually push away from each other. Any other comments? I don't want to overdo Valley of Death. I know it's about 8:40 now. Why don't we do this? Let me give you back this time. You can work in your teams. We'll have a full complement. I think Ian will be back next week. And hopefully you guys are starting to put your final presentations together. Is anyone planning on a last minute pivot? No. Good, okay, I'm glad to hear that. So stay the course, right? Polish it up. Does anyone have any problems getting their interview stuff? Anything we can do to help?
No, probably not.
Okay. How far along have you got? How many
I'm
interviews?
just getting passed around the USDA.
Wow.
Just in
Okay.
circles. So I feel like I
Can Willem help? Because he might have some contacts over there.
maybe, I'll give them a call tomorrow, and then if it's bad, then I'll reach out to you for
Okay. Anyone else have any problems with interviews?
It happened to talk to Northwest Sustainability Manager,
Okay.
and yeah, she allowed us to test this concept during the spring break.
Really?
But now we are trying to find customers for.
So when you say test this concept, is it going to be in the food halls or?
Yeah, it's across the entire outlets, the outlets and.
The Norris? Okay, so just one building, right? Not any more than one building. Or is,
It's what she said that like you can test it, I think in
One of
3
them.
or 4 maybe out spots that because some of them are closed during breaks.
yeah.
She said that once those are open, you can try that thing out in those. But yeah, we have to kind of figure out who the customers will be willing to buy the produce of it.
And how to reach out to them.
Yeah.
So for what it's worth, Loyola campus does a lot of food waste recycling. They have this waste to oil, I guess, waste oil to energy type conversion. So they're running their buses on waste oil. Okay. And actually it's labeled on their buses. So I'm sure you'd be able to talk to them about it. They've been doing it for years. So I think they're a little bit more progressive, but we have, most of our work is outsourced, right? You're dealing with a third party, right?
Yeah, it's a Compass.
Compass Dining, Compass is huge.
They
We are
manage
just an platform where we are connecting the customers and the suppliers.
So here's the good news. If you succeed with Compass, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And they can move you very quickly from campus to campus, state to state. Even I think they have corporate clients too.
Yeah, they have.
So Compass is
That's
huge.
why, Northwestern, I think testing this concept at the dining halls and during the break should be a really good start. But yeah, of course, finding the customers who are willing to buy, I think it's the next step that we are working on.
So by the way, I think yours is a team that definitely should think about competing, especially in a place like Rice, because I think this will go well at Rice. You got time. I know you're doing other competition.
Yeah,
You're spreading that, right? Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'll see you all next week. Have a good rest of the evening. Thanks to the folks online. For those who missed it, we will be posting this on our channel on YouTube. I'll send out the link.
I have one on Friday. I reached out to 4 other people. At the
Easily around it. Counting concept
Is it okay if I shut down the link? Are you guys gonna use Zoom tonight or not?
Yeah. We'll try.
We're gonna use it.
You
We
use
can
this?
use it different.
Yeah, set up your own link.
Yeah.
Okay. For those on Zoom, your colleagues here are gonna set up new links, so I'm gonna shut this one down.
It's the middle of the semester. How did this come about?